No. Bare was a chair left empty at the table. It had my name on it, just not in the way I expected. Let me back up. My name is Clara. I'm 31 years old. I work as a registered nurse at a mid-sized hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts 3 days a week, sometimes 4 when they're short-staffed. I'm not rich. I'm not struggling either. I've built something steady and quiet for myself. A 1-bedroom apartment with good light, a savings account I actually contribute to, a life I'm genuinely proud of. My sister is 36. Her name is Dana. She married well, her words, not mine, 5 years ago, and she has never let anyone forget it. Her husband, my brother-in-law, comes from old money in Connecticut. They live in a house with a mudroom and a wine cellar and a guest bathroom that has heated floors. I know about the heated floors because Dana mentioned them at Thanksgiving 3 years in a row. I love my sister. I want to say that clearly up front because what I'm about to tell you isn't a story about hate. It's a story about finally understanding what love actually requires of you and what it doesn't. Our mother raised the two of us mostly alone after our father left when I was 9. She worked retail management for 20 years, held everything together with her bare hands, and when she finally retired 2 years ago, she moved into a small condo in Scottsdale that Dana and I helped her furnish. I bought the couch. Dana bought a throw pillow she saw at an airport boutique and told the story about it for 6 months. That's important context. Hold on to it. The dinner I'm about to describe happened on a Saturday in March. It was organized around our mother's 62nd birthday. Dana called me in February to discuss it, which felt thoughtful at first. I found this incredible place downtown, she said. 14-course tasting menu, the chef trained in Lyon. Mom would absolutely love it. I looked up the restaurant while we were on the phone. The prix-fixe alone was $240 per person. Wine pairing was an additional $110. That's pretty expensive, I said. How many people are we inviting? Just family, Dana said. Me and Brett, you, Mom, Aunt Patrice, and maybe Uncle Gary if he's in town. I did the math quietly in my head. 6 people. Possibly 7. Wine pairings for everyone because Dana and Brett don't drink water at dinner. We were approaching $2,000 before tax and tip. Are we splitting this? I asked. There was a pause on the line that I recognized but couldn't quite name at the time. The kind of pause that means someone has already decided something and is now deciding how to say it. Let's just figure it out at dinner, Dana said brightly. The important thing is that Mom has a beautiful birthday. I agreed. I told myself I was being generous. I told myself it was fine. It was not fine. But I didn't know the full shape of that yet. I got to the restaurant at 7:15, 5 minutes early, in a black wrap dress I'd bought 2 years ago that still fits perfectly. I gave the host my name and said I was there for the Caldwell party. He smiled, picked up 2 menus, and began walking. The restaurant was stunning. Low lighting, warm wood, white linen on every table. The kind of place where the servers describe each course in full sentences. The kind of place where you feel, simply by being inside it, that something significant is about to happen. The host stopped at a round table near the back of the main dining room. Dana was already seated, along with Brett, my mother, Aunt Patrice, and Uncle Gary, who apparently had made it into town after all. 6 people. 1 empty chair. I counted the place settings. 6. The empty chair had no setting in front of it. "Oh, Clara, you made it," Dana said, waving with genuine warmth, the kind that's so practiced it looks real even when it isn't. We went ahead and sat down. The amuse-bouche was about to arrive. I looked at the empty chair, then at the table, then back at my sister. "Is there a setting coming for me?" I asked. Dana tilted her head like she hadn't considered the question. "Oh, we weren't sure if you were coming for the full dinner. I thought you mentioned something about a shift." I had not mentioned anything about a shift. I had confirmed this dinner twice, once by text 2 weeks ago and once by call the previous Tuesday. I know this because I went back and read the messages later, the way you do when you need to verify that you aren't losing your mind. "I confirmed Tuesday," I said, calmly. Right, Dana said, waving a hand toward Brett. "Babe, can you grab a server? Clara needs a setting." Brett flagged someone down. A setting was brought. I sat down. I smiled at my mother, who reached over and squeezed my hand and said, "You look beautiful, sweetheart." I smiled at Aunt Patrice, who was already on what appeared to be her second glass of champagne. I nodded at Uncle Gary, who was studying the wine list like it was a legal document. I told myself the setting mix-up was a simple oversight. Families are disorganized. People miscommunicate. I was very good at telling myself things like that. The first few courses were genuinely extraordinary. A tiny spoon of sea urchin with yuzu foam, a single perfect bite of seared scallop on a smear of parsnip puree. My mother closed her eyes at the scallop and said, "This is the best thing I've ever eaten," and I felt, for a moment, entirely glad we were there. Dana ordered a bottle of Burgundy at the sommelier's suggestion, $1,840. I saw the price on the list because the sommelier left it open on the table. I glanced at it the way you glance at something you weren't supposed to see and then look away from quickly. Brett ordered a second bottle at the same price point. He said, "We're celebrating, right?" And everyone laughed, and I laughed too, though mine came from a slightly different place. By course 7, the conversation had turned to Dana and Brett's upcoming trip to the Amalfi Coast. Dana described a hotel in such detail, the terrace, the infinity pool, the private boat they'd chartered for a day, that it became less of a conversation and more of a presentation. My mother nodded and said how wonderful at appropriate intervals. Aunt Patrice asked about the food. Uncle Gary had abandoned the wine list and was now looking at his phone under the table. I ate my venison with cherry reduction and listened and said almost nothing, which is a skill I've developed over years of family dinners. At course 11, Dana leaned toward me slightly and said, "Clara, I'm so glad you're here. You work so hard. You deserve a night like this." I said thank you. I meant it, even knowing what I know now. You can mean something and still be used. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Dessert arrived, a chocolate sphere that a server melted tableside with warm caramel. My mother made a sound of pure delight. Dana took 4 photos before touching hers. Brett told a story about a dessert he'd had in Tokyo that was, in his estimation, slightly superior. Uncle Gary ate his in 4 bites and asked if there was more bread. And then the check arrived. The server set it in the center of the table. Equid. Eastontant from everyone, the way servers do when they've decided neutrality is the safest policy. It sat there for a moment, that small leather folder, like something that had quietly been waiting all evening to introduce itself. Nobody moved toward it. I watched the table. Brett was swirling the last of his wine. Dana was touching up her lipstick using her phone camera. Aunt Patrice was telling my mother about a TV show. Uncle Gary was looking at the leather folder with the focused non-attention of a man who has decided he didn't see it. 10 seconds. 15. 20. I did not reach for it. This was new. Normally I would have reached for it by now, out of some deeply conditioned reflex. Some old story I'd been telling myself about what generosity looks like, about being the responsible one, about keeping the peace by absorbing the cost of it. But something had shifted in me over those 3 hours, slowly and without announcement, the way a tide shifts. I sat with my hands in my lap and I waited. Dana finished her lipstick. Looked up, looked at the folder, looked at me. "Clara," she said, in a voice that was warm and familiar and completely certain of itself, "would you mind? You know how Brett and I handle all the house stuff? It's just easier if you take this one and we sort it out later." There it was, the sentence I'd been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. I looked at my sister. I want to describe her face in that moment accurately. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't smirking. She looked genuinely, completely comfortable. The way you look when you're asking someone to do something you've asked them to do 100 times before and they've always said yes. That was the thing that clarified everything for me. Not malice, certainty. "How much is it?" I asked. Dana waved a hand. "I'm sure it's fine. We'll figure out the details later." "I'd like to see it first," I said. She blinked. A micro expression, gone almost instantly. Then she smiled and slid the folder toward me. I opened it. The total, before tip, was $4,312. I looked at the itemized receipt, the 2 bottles of Burgundy, 14 courses times 6, plus the supplemental charges for the Wagyu substitution Dana had requested at course 9, plus Brett's extra cheese course, plus Uncle Gary's additional dessert, plus Aunt Patrice's digestive. My portion. One pre-exfixie, water, and the single glass of sparkling wine I'd had at the start came to $260. I closed the folder. "I'm not paying this," I said. The table went very quiet, not the held breath quiet of anticipation, but the sudden quiet of a room where something has just landed that wasn't expected. Dana's smile stayed in place. "Clara? I'll pay for my portion," I said. $260, which I'm estimating based on what I ordered. I'm happy to split that with my credit card. I looked at the server who had materialized nearby with professional discretion. "Could we split this? I can pay for one pre-exfixie and one glass of sparkling." The server said of course and took the folder back. Dana set down her wine glass. "That's not really how this works," she said. "We're family. We share these things." "We do," I said. "That's why I'd love for everyone to share this one equally." "Brett and I handle so much," Dana said, and her voice had taken on that particular texture, still pleasant on the surface but with something tightening underneath. "The holiday planning, Mom's condo stuff last year, the coordination for everything, we do a lot. You work, Clara. You don't have the same kind of responsibilities." I felt my mother go still beside me. I didn't look at her yet. "I work 60 hours a week taking care of sick people," I said. Not loudly. I wasn't angry exactly, I was clear. There's a difference, and I've only recently learned to feel it. I contributed to Mom's condo. I drove her to her cardiology appointments for 4 months when her license was suspended. I don't need to defend my contributions, but I'm also not paying $4,000 for a dinner I didn't plan and didn't order most of. Clara. Dana's voice had gone soft in that warning way. The way that means, you are embarrassing us. "It's Mom's birthday," I said. "I hope it's been a beautiful one." I looked at my mother then. Her eyes were bright in a way I couldn't fully read. Not hurt, not angry, something more complicated. Something that looked like it had been sitting in her chest for a while, waiting for the right moment to surface. "I love you, Mom," she said. "I love you too, baby." The server returned with a split receipt. I put my card in and signed for $274 with tip. Then I stood up, folded my napkin, set it on the table, and picked up my coat. "You're leaving," Dana said. "I'm leaving," I said. "Clara, this is..." She stopped, started again. "You're being incredibly selfish right now." I thought about the empty place setting, the 2-minute pause before anyone acknowledged I didn't have one. The phrase, "You just work, Clara," the certainty on her face when she slid the bill toward me. "I really hope you all have a wonderful rest of the evening," I said. And I walked out. The night air outside was cold and clean. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and took 3 slow breaths. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. I'd expected them to be shaking. I got in my car. I sat in the parking garage for maybe 10 minutes without starting the engine. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even particularly sad, which also surprised me. I felt something closer to settled. Like a picture that had been hanging slightly crooked for years and someone had finally straightened it. My phone lit up. Text from Dana. That was really hurtful and immature. "We'll talk about this when you've had time to calm down." Then one from Aunt Patrice, Clara. "Honey, we had to put it on 3 cards. Brett is furious. I hope you know what you did tonight." Then, 20 minutes later, one from a number I didn't immediately recognize. I had to scroll up in my contacts to find it. My cousin Jess, Dana's youngest, who'd been away at school and hadn't been at dinner. It said, "My mom called me. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. She does this every time. You're the only one who's ever said no." I sat with that text for a long time. Here's what I've learned about families, or at least about mine. There are roles that get assigned early, before you're old enough to negotiate them. The responsible one, the generous one, the one who handles it, the one who absorbs. And those roles don't get questioned because they're convenient for everyone, and questioning them costs something. Social warmth, a sense of belonging, the illusion of harmony. So you pay. Year after year, you pay in money and in silence and in empty place settings you pretend not to notice. The thing about those roles is that they only hold as long as you agree to play them. I went home that night and made tea and sat on my couch in the good light from my kitchen and thought about my mother's face when I said I wasn't paying. That complicated brightness in her eyes. I thought about it for a long time before I understood what I was seeing. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't shocked. She looked relieved. She texted me the next morning. Not an apology. My mother has her own complicated relationship with conflict, and I don't need her to be different than she is. Just, good morning, sweetheart. Thank you for being there last night. I love you more than you know. I wrote back, I love you too, Mom. Happy birthday. Dana didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Then she called and I answered and she said, I feel like things have been weird between us in the tone she uses when she wants to resolve something without acknowledging what the something is. I told her I loved her and that I had some things I needed to say, and I said them, calmly and completely, and she listened better than I expected her to. I don't know what happens next between us. I'm not sure that's the point of this story. The point is the moment in that parking garage, alone with the engine off, my hands perfectly still in my lap. The moment I realized that the most frightening thing I'd ever done, saying no, standing up, walking out, had not destroyed me. Had not destroyed anything, actually. Had only revealed what was already there. Some things break when you finally push back on them. Some things, it turns out, were hollow all along. And some things, the important ones, hold. If you've been the one who always absorbs, the one who always handles it, the one who takes the empty seat and smiles through it, this is your reminder that you don't have to keep accepting roles you never auditioned for. Walking away from a dinner table is not the end of a family. Sometimes it's the first honest thing that's happened at that table in years. I went back to work Monday morning, pulled a 12-hour shift, took care of strangers with more tenderness than some of them get at home. On my break, I sat in the break room with a cup of coffee and thought about heated floors and hollow gestures and the exact sound a table makes when someone finally stops being quiet. It sounds, I discovered, like a chair being pushed back, like footsteps, like a door. I used to think that keeping the peace was the same thing as keeping the family. For most of my adult life, those two things lived in the same place inside me, tangled together so tightly I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. So I paid. I absorbed. I smiled through empty place settings and casual dismissals and the particular exhaustion of being someone's safety net while never quite being their equal. What I've come to understand, slowly, the way you understand anything that matters, is that actions accumulate. Every time I reached for the check without being asked, I was teaching the people around me something about what I would accept. Every time I let a small humiliation pass without naming it, I was confirming that the cost of my silence was zero. I wasn't keeping the peace. I was funding it. And there is a difference. That night at the restaurant, something in me finally did the math. Not the math on the bill, though that was clarifying enough, but the deeper math. The years of it. The pattern of it. The absolute certainty on my sister's face when she slid that folder across the table, as if she already knew the answer and was only waiting for me to confirm it. That certainty was the product of every time I had confirmed it before. I had built it, quietly, one capitulation at a time. That's not a comfortable thing to sit with, but it's an honest one. What I did next wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. I didn't walk out to punish anyone. I walked out because I finally understood that continuing to stay, to absorb, to pay, to pretend, would have been a choice, and I was no longer willing to make it unconsciously. There's a kind of courage that doesn't look like courage from the outside. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't make a scene. It just gets very still and very clear and says, not this time. That stillness took me 31 years to find. I don't think that's a failure. I think that's just how long it sometimes takes to understand that your own dignity is not negotiable. Not for a dinner, not for a relationship, not for anyone's comfort, including your own. My cousin Jess told me I was the only one who'd ever said no. I've thought about that text more than almost anything else from that night. Because what it told me is that the role I'd been playing wasn't inevitable. It was just unchallenged. The moment I challenged it, the whole structure shifted. Not dramatically, not with a collapse, but perceptibly, like a room where someone finally opened a window. I don't know what kind of relationship my sister and I will build from here. What I know is that whatever it becomes, it will be built on something real. Not on my silence. Not on her assumptions. on what we're actually willing to give each other honestly with clear eyes. That feels, for the first time in a long time, like something worth having.